Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is Ryan Hughes, founder of the Mr. Investa brand, Buy to Let Experts. Welcome to you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Good to see you back. And on Ryan's right is David Hanna, chairman of Cornerstone Group, property taxation experts. Good to see you back, David.
Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Great. Well, you gave us great answers last time, and I'm sure you'll do exactly the same this. So, Ryan, we're going to start off with you. And rental rates are rising across the country. What do the panel think the longer term effect of this will be? At the moment, it seems to be aggravated by a shortage of stock driven by smaller buy-to-let landlords selling up. Would you agree with that?
I think the landlords selling is a change in the market. Some of them that are seeing the rental properties increase are retaining them a lot longer. People that were selling are now holding on. Some of the shortages down to the increased standards that we've seen. So tenants are staying in the properties longer. So the properties that are coming available, or them ASTs that are running out and coming up for renewal, are seeing higher rental income. I do believe that we will see it slow down. I don't think we'll see it drop off, but there's Manchester city centre, for example, there's a lot of properties there now that aren't hitting them rental projections that people expected, and they're now starting to find a level. With any new build, it's projected figures. They're now finding a level where they're not at 100% occupancy.
Is that affecting the funding opportunities?
I don't believe so, because a lot of them are already backed based on the specific the spec of the properties.
Okay, but in general, you think standards are going up to match the increase in prices?
I believe so, and the ones that aren't, or the people that aren't able to afford it, are going further afield. I've seen people that are commuting from Liverpool to Manchester city centre because of the price difference, just because of obviously the support that Manchester's had with some of the larger companies choosing Manchester over Liverpool, and even Greater Manchester is feeling the benefit of that.
Do you think COVID has encouraged all this moving about?
There's two sides for me. There's a lot of people that think, oh, we need more people on the ladder and it's really hard to get on the ladder. But when you speak to a lot of tenants, they want the flexibility. You know, there's a lot of people, there's instances and there's a lot of people that still want to get on the ladder, and it is getting harder because of obviously the rent increases. But there's a lot of people that really enjoy renting.
Will this encourage shorter term rental agreements, do you think?
I think for both parties, usually, in my experience, people will start off on a 6 month, see how it is. That used to be based on see if the tenant pays on time. Now I think it's done with in 6 months' time, there'll be a rent increase rather than sign them straight up to a 12 month.
Yes. Do you go with this, David? Do you think, are you finding a lot of your perhaps client landlords are changing their view of the market?
I think the market is, to use the phrase, chronically complex at the moment. I mean, you know, start with the COVID effect. Prior to COVID, we saw the number of private small landlords being reduced by government policies. Then we had lockdown. We had a massive net migration from London, particularly. A lot of people buying homes in the country. And I'm not talking just in Hertfordshire. I had clients move from West London to Cornwall and announce they were never going back. There seems to have been a moderate reversal of that as London is concerned. But fundamentally, what we are seeing still is a chronic undersupply of housing generally, be it available to buy or available to let. And there's been a further complication, and I'll call it a complication, is that we've now got net inward migration from the Far East. My stepdaughter recently bought a new home in a new development on the east side of Nottingham. And of the 12 properties surrounding her, 5 of them have gone to Hong Kong Chinese families to live in who've all recently moved here. So at the fundamentals, we need more supply of housing in this country. We need incentives to encourage building. And then we need to understand the dynamics of the owner market versus the rental market. And as Ryan perfectly correctly says, There's a hardcore of people who like to rent.
Well, David, I think you're right on a lot of that. And I can quote developments down here that have got plus 75% of overseas owners, which does make management difficult sometimes. I mean, trying to get 400 or 500 overseas owners to agree on something where money's involved is often quite difficult, to say the least. But it's interesting, you both sort of say the property market. I'm always very interested in what does the property market mean? It's so diverse, it's so complex these days, that to try and identify any one part of it and predict any one part of its performance is very difficult, don't you think?
I believe so. I completely agree. That's where when we speak to a client, we have to go in there on a consultancy basis. Where are they from? What are they looking for? What do they currently know? Especially with yourself there, probably 55-60% of our business is with overseas buyers and sellers that are looking to migrate to the UK or looking to dispose of assets within the UK.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, David, we need to move on to your question. In the past years, there have been many investors that have bought properties and held them in offshore companies, which when sold don't attract stamp duty, as it's just the bearer shares which are purchased without the property technically changing hands. Do such opportunities still exist?
In short, yes. These opportunities still exist. It is perfectly possible to buy a limited liability vehicle containing a property, be that onshore or offshore. Clearly, if one is buying an offshore company, one doesn't even pay stamp duty on the shares. That's got to be distinguished from stamp duty, land tax on the property. If you're buying a UK company holding an investment property, then you would pay stamp duty on the net asset value of the company.
So that could be the same, couldn't it?
It could be the same as the property, but if that property is mortgaged inside the company, so you've got £2 million property with a £1 million mortgage, the net asset value is only £1 million, so you only pay stamp duty on the NAV.
Well, that's quite a saving in itself, isn't it?
It still can be quite a saving in itself. One has to remember, of course, that buying a property inside a corporate envelope is tax disincentivized if you intend to live in it. You're going to end up paying annual tax on envelope dwellings if it's more than £500,000, and there's a number of additional, I'll call them quirks and issues surrounding it. But if you're talking about a pure investment play, then yeah, by all means buy. The caution and warning about this, of course, is that you're no longer buying bricks and mortar on which you can get searches. You're buying a business, a limited company, and you've got to do a lot of due diligence, particularly over undisclosed liabilities, contingent liabilities, tax due diligence, and those run up professional costs. So,
and that's going to be even more complicated if it's offshore.
The difficulty is getting assurances, is getting sufficiently, I'll call them strong warranties, guarantees from the sellers that there are no skeletons in the closet, as it were.
Which would affect your funding, wouldn't it?
Potentially could affect the funding. Again, if you're buying a limited liability vehicle that already has a mortgage in place, it's very likely that the beneficial owner has personally guaranteed that mortgage, that the bank lending to that company may not be happy with you as the new shareholder without new guarantees, and they may even say, I'm sorry, we don't lend to people like you. And by that I don't mean anything disparaging. They may not lend to UK residents, for example. There are some banks that won't do that. So again, you may be in the situation of having not only to buy the company, but refinance the mortgage in the company at the same time.
But it might present a good opportunity for perhaps buying a buy-to-let portfolio that's in a limited company.
Absolutely excellent opportunity. Nice, clean, easy way of picking it up in terms of, I'll call it the acquisition process. A lot simpler than the conveyancing. Question again is corporate due diligence. Yes. Can you get sufficient guarantees and assurances?
Okay, well, on that bit of good news, we're going to go to the break. So join me again, where we'll be asking Ryan and David more of your questions. See you shortly. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and I'm joined by David Hannah and Ryan Hughes. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, do the panel think that the current restrictions on the issuance of HMO licences should be made consistent throughout the country? my thinking is that this would greatly increase the reasonably priced rental opportunities, especially for young people. And I'm guessing that's as a result of there been a lot of publicity about some councils allowing HMOs, some saying no, not in my backyard. What do you think?
My background is HMO, so we've seen probably the most changes in the property market to the HMO market. It is, in my opinion, the most difficult market because of the constant year upon year changes. I don't think they have the manpower to govern it, and I believe there is some bad landlords that is going to cost all of the landlords. There should be certain guidance of what is required, but a perfect example is one year we had to replace 66 fire doors because they were 30-minute resistant. The following year it was 60 minutes. We had to change 66 doors, and they're probably still in the cellars now of them units. There's too much change. If they've got the manpower and can prove that they are checking and qualifying, some areas don't need HMOs, but I believe some can thrive, especially certain universities. Manchester and Salford don't certainly need some, but I know Newcastle and Leeds would certainly benefit from some of the HMOs, especially with the private landlords. Some of the standards, and we had a discussion before, some of the standards that some of the landlords are bringing with these HMOs, with them being more of a studio style apartment, there's still a good appetite for HMOs. Again, I don't think they should be getting involved. I think that should be down to when you're going for planning of a HMO. That should be, is it required in this area?
Okay. But I mean, I think isn't the sort of place of the HMO moving up the scale a little bit with all these sort of co-living spaces where there's tremendous sort of accent on super facilities, cinema rooms, gymnasiums, really sort of adventurous, kitchen areas, that sort of thing.
I think it allows people to be more central at a lot lower cost to having the shared facilities, whether it be a bathroom, whether it be a kitchen. It allows people to be more central at a lot lower rental cost, but with that, people do expect higher standards for the area.
And do those co-living spaces require the same licensing requirements?
I think it's very difficult because at the moment some people are saying this is a HMO and it's a student HMO, and then you've got the people bordering on serviced accommodation, and I think people sway with the wind to how they're feeling at that time.
I was thinking something I saw in the press the other day about one of these co-living spaces. They'd actually renamed it a sort of residential club.
Yeah.
Which you joined, which of course took you out of the need for any kind of lease agreement, any kind of HMO licensing, and simply relied on a sort of license agreement for you joining the club.
I think the model that we're discussing there is becoming more popular with something that we've discussed in a previous show, where there is people using them for 2 days a week and then going back to the country. People do like that. So the original HMO, student HMO, with that communal feature and being 6, 7, 8 students in a house, getting that campus experience off campus for second and third years and so on. But it actually is very attractive to the residential market for people that want that more flexibility.
Well, I quite like the idea of these HMOs and the improved versions, but do you think it is an issue that so many different councils have got so many different views on whether they want them or not? Is that not a problem for investors?
I believe so, and it stops people from operating in certain spaces, which then obviously has an effect on that current city or town, which is obviously the reason why people are doing it, because obviously you bring in a lot of the conversions that we used to do was 3 or 4 bed terraced houses into 6, 7 bed HMOs by extending the roofs. All of a sudden, what is expected of that area now has a larger population, which then feeds back into the community. So I think it really depends on what that, I do believe each area should make their own decision on it in terms of governing if it's required or not requiring, because I believe it's a great way to create a better community by increasing the population at a lower cost to the rental
But again, this consistency business is quite an issue across the market, because you've got permitted development rights now, and you've got certain councils are doing everything and more to not give permitted development rights, aren't they? They're finding all sorts of loopholes and conditions that they need to impose or want to impose.
I think you've either got to be in or out across the board. It just leads to so many misleading, certain areas that we operate in Bolton, HMO licensing isn't required. So now everyone that was in Salford or Manchester have now just gone a bit further into Greater Manchester, or they've come away from Liverpool and they've gone to Halifax and certain areas. So it's on the local authorities, but it allows the investors to still operate in other areas.
Do you think this is a fault of government not giving enough leadership in these areas, or is it councils acting as sort of mavericks, or what?
I think people do it for pull, for sound bites. We see it consistently throughout the property market. Someone comes in with a certain incentive, and I'm sure we'll see more of it over the coming years, and they go, here's what we're doing, this sounds great, actually that didn't work out. For me, they should stay out of it, but it should be dealt with at the planning stage of whether it's required if it's an overpopulated area or it doesn't fit in with that area. It's nice being in the countryside, and you don't want to see a HMO completely change the landscape of an area.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. Now then, David, your second question. You're going to love this one. Given that in theory one should be able to buy property investments with Bitcoin or similar currencies, what are the taxation pitfalls or benefits of doing so? Now I'm going to tell you, you've got about 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Thank you for that. Well, the short answer is buying a property with Bitcoin. As far as the purchaser is concerned, you're buying a property. Ordinarily, you would pay for a property with cash. Of course, cash doesn't have any tax implications. Bitcoin, of course, is not a currency, despite it being described as a cryptocurrency. So therefore, it will either have a capital gains element to it, or indeed possibly an income tax element to it. Let me explain why. You're swapping an asset, your crypto, for an asset property. That, as you swap it, is a disposal for capital gains purposes. And to the extent you've made a profit on your Bitcoin.
And it sets the value.
Got
it.
So the difference between what you bought it for and what the buyer is accepted for, i.e. the value of the property, that's your capital gain. You're then going to have liable to pay capital gains tax on it. If you've been a regular Bitcoin trader and you've been in, out and whatever, it could be that HMRC regard you as trading in Bitcoin, and you could be liable for income tax. So yeah, potentially there's a few downsides that need to be costed in, as it were, before you start handing over your Bitcoin or Ethereum. I don't know, is Ethereum worth anything at the moment?
I don't know.
Stay away from it. Stay away from it. Tangible assets, please.
Well, absolutely. But because this is the problem inherent with cryptocurrencies. They're not what are called fiat currencies. I'm not referring to the motor manufacturer. They're not national currencies run by national banks. And therefore, they have this inherent risk when you dispose. There is likely to be a tax liability.
Well, I saw a very good cartoon. Somebody who says, "Let me explain the Bitcoin process for you," and it was a picture of a drain and this tramp just dropping coins down the drain. So there might have been a slight warning there. But I mean, one of the difficulties, I can remember going to a sort of seminar on this with one of the big lawyers in London, and they were saying one of the difficulties for them was under money laundering regulations, was checking the provenance of the money coming in. And is that a huge issue?
I think from a due diligence standpoint, the provenance of the money, where did you get this Bitcoin from? Well, you can usually trace back to where you made your original investment. If you've been stupid enough to accept Bitcoin in exchange for nuclear weapons or other explosives, then yeah, frankly, it's on you. But most ordinary investors will have gone into Bitcoin relatively early. They'll have looked at the accumulated gains they've made over the years, and they'll be saying, well, now I want to swap it into a real asset. And it should be fairly easy to prove. The value and the valuation of Bitcoin, of course, can't take place until the day of completion.
Well, no, of course, it might be quite volatile, mightn't it?
It might well be volatile, and the problem that the seller has is, how do I ensure I get my price? And you probably see a fairly complicated contract that sort of has an underage and an overage clause in that says you have to make up the difference on the day of completion in cash, which tends to lead one to the conclusion that you will never see an exclusively Bitcoin property purchase. There will always have to be some sort of element of cash in there.
Yes, I suppose so. Have you come across this at all, Ryan?
I come across this maybe 6-7 years ago when we was doing a property show in Dubai, and the same in Qatar a couple of months before, and people walking around saying, who will accept Bitcoin or crypto for property? These are what I've got. What properties can I buy with you? And it just didn't sit right. It never has sat right with me because of the volatility. And how do they ensure they get that price? And then the next day it drops. I believe there is a market and there will be a space for it, but it will be crypto traders to other crypto traders, like-minded to like-minded sales, not someone going, oh, well, I'll accept that because I want to get into it. I know the appetite for this space, and I believe it will be a very small market of people, you know, if it's so great, why are you trying to change it into a tangible asset? You know, that's the big one for me. So it depends how people are trying to build their portfolio and of what assets.
Okay. Well, now we've decimated the Bitcoin market. That's all we've got time. That's all we've got time for today. So, big thank you to David Hanna, chairman of Cornerstone Group, and to Ryan Hughes, founder of the Mr. Investa brand. Thank you both very much today for coming in. That's all we've got time for. So I look forward to seeing you again next time on Property Question Time.